Arthur Engoron just issued an order that has sent shockwaves through Manhattan and Washington. Trump's most prized properties, including Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, now face immediate seizure to satisfy a $464 million judgment.
A federal judge didn't just issue another ruling. He crossed a line no one thought would ever be crossed. Trump's most famous properties are no longer just under threat. They are now legally vulnerable to seizure. This isn't a freeze. This isn't a warning. This is the legal system moving to take real buildings tied to Trump's name and identity. And once courts move from words to property, there's no rewind button. What just happened changes everything. This didn't start with a seizure order. It started with time, a lot of it. For nearly 11 months, the court gave Trump options: post the appeal bond, arrange payment, propose a plan. Any one of them would have paused enforcement. Ordinary defendants do this every day without headlines. Trump didn't. Court filings show deadline after deadline passed. Extensions were granted. Accommodations were discussed. Still nothing. Judges warned that patience was running out. The warnings were public. The consequences were spelled out. And here's where the calculation changed. According to the court, Trump wasn't claiming confusion. He wasn't locked out financially. He was openly dismissing the judgment while publicly boasting about his wealth. That contradiction mattered. Judges don't move to seizures because they're angry. They do it when defiance becomes a pattern. That's when this stopped looking like politics and started looking like enforcement. Smash that like button if this is clicking so far. Because the next step wasn't a fine, it was something far more visible, and this is where symbolism enters the case. This is where the story stops being abstract. Trump Tower isn't just another asset on a spreadsheet. It's the physical symbol of Trump's rise, the place where deals were announced, power was projected, and wealth was performed in public. And now it's a target. Court documents didn't list properties randomly. They named specific buildings tied directly to Trump's brand and identity. Commercial floors, revenue-producing space, assets that send a message when touched. That's not coincidence, that's leverage. When the court authorizes seizure of a property like Trump Tower, it's not just about money, it's about visibility, about making enforcement impossible to ignore, about showing that status does not create immunity. People who work in New York real estate understand this instantly. You can lose cash quietly. You don't lose landmark buildings quietly. This is why the moment feels humiliating, not because of headlines, but because power is being taken in public. And once that happens, control never comes back the same way. Next, the state steps in. At this point, the case stopped being about Trump alone, because courts don't just enforce judgments to collect money, they enforce them to protect the system. If rulings can be ignored long enough, they stop meaning anything. That's the risk judges are trained to avoid. According to legal experts, allowing a former president to refuse standard appeal requirements for nearly a year would have created a dangerous exception, not written into law, but visible to everyone watching. The court made something clear without saying it outright. If this defendant gets special treatment, every future defendant will demand it. That's why the language of the order matters. It doesn't sound emotional, it sounds final. It frames enforcement as routine, not dramatic, as something any New York resident would face under the same conditions. This is where claims of persecution lose traction. Procedures weren't changed, rules weren't bent. The same tools used against ordinary debtors were simply applied upward. And that's what makes this moment uncomfortable for many people, because it suggests the system is still willing to act, even when the defendant once held the highest office in the country. But enforcement has consequences beyond the courtroom. Once a court authorizes seizure, the damage doesn't stop at the defendant, it ripples outward. Banks notice, tenants notice, business partners notice. In real estate, perception is leverage, and court-ordered enforcement is a red flag no press release can erase. Forced liquidation is especially brutal. Properties sold under court supervision rarely fetch full value. Buyers circle for discounts. Appraisers downgrade expectations. What looks like a $300 million asset on paper can collapse into far less once urgency enters the room.
That's the irony here. By refusing to post a bond, a move meant to delay consequences, Trump may end up losing assets worth far more than the judgment itself. And this hits the brand where it hurts most. Trump's image has always rested on dominance and control, but Seizure flips that image upside down. It signals that decisions are no longer his to make. Drop a comment if you see the trap forming. Because once courts take control, the next moves aren't political, they're administrative, and administration doesn't care about reputation. What happens when control officially changes hands? On the morning the order took effect, the state didn't wait. Attorneys from the New York Attorney General's office arrived at Trump Tower carrying court orders, accompanied by deputy marshals. They presented official paperwork to building management and informed commercial tenants that the state now controlled the floors. It was surreal. Staff who had worked in the building for decades described confusion and disbelief. Security protocols changed overnight. Decisions that once required Trump organization approval were suddenly under government authority. Conference rooms became command centers. Notices went out to tenants, not as warnings, but as facts. For the first time, the iconic tower no longer functioned as Trump's property. And while the law moved predictably, the symbolism struck hard. Public humiliation isn't about gossip. It's about the tangible moment when power is stripped in front of witnesses. Observers noted one detail that made the scene even more extraordinary. The court's enforcement was immediate. No delay, no negotiation. This wasn't a future threat. It was happening in real time. And what this means for Trump's next move could redefine everything. The seizure doesn't just hurt Trump financially. It sends shockwaves through his political narrative. For years, his image has been built on business mastery, dominance, and untouchability. Now, enforcement paints a different story. Refusal to comply leads to loss, and no office or title shields you from consequences. Political operatives are already recalculating. Opponents see material for campaign ads. Allies wonder how to respond without alienating supporters. Lenders and partners who once assumed Trump could navigate any legal or financial challenge now confront a clear public demonstration that even the most iconic assets can be removed by court order. Legal experts warn that the precedent matters more than the dollar amounts. If a former president can be treated like any other debtor, it strengthens the authority of the civil justice system. Conversely, ignoring the order would erode it. And yet, Trump hasn't posted the bond, hasn't negotiated a pause, and continues to publicly dismiss the ruling. Next, we reveal why that decision could be catastrophic for him and why it might be irreversible. Trump now faces a choice that could define his legacy or endanger it entirely. Every day the properties remain under court control, the potential financial loss grows. Forced liquidation could turn flagship buildings into bargain sales, erasing decades of wealth and reputation. But this isn't just about money. It's about power, narrative, and control. The public sees a former president whose iconic tower can be seized like any other asset. The message is unmistakable. No status, no brand, no title is above the law. And yet, there's one unresolved factor that keeps everyone guessing. Will Trump finally post the bond? Will federal appeals intervene? Or will the liquidation process accelerate, stripping away control before any political or legal maneuver can stop it? The answer will unfold in the coming days, and whatever happens next could reshape not just Trump's empire, but the limits of accountability for every powerful figure in America. The courts have spoken. The countdown has begun. What comes next could shock the nation.